whatever she's known by, whether it's mom or mother or mommy, 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 mommy. There's some wonderful things that can be said about the experience of being a mother, like love in its purest, most unselfish form, or the art of giving your heart away and knowing it's still full, or a lifetime of learning to let go while still holding on. And so today I'd like to introduce you to a 27-year-old mother that we'll call Cassie. Now, Cassie, a single mother of two beautiful children, one a baby boy that just happened to be born while Cassie was incarcerated. Now, you may ask yourself, and we may say together, how in the world could this happen to a single mother? Maybe you say, what in the world did she do to get her there? But before we answer that second question, let me assure you that Cassie never thought she would be there either. Until she came home one night with the realization that the only way she could stop the continued abuse of those two beautiful children was to end it right here and right now. And she did. Because you see, Cassie simply thought that she had run out of options. And because Cassie, not a woman of means, to hire the best criminal defense attorney in town, was assigned the public defender, who was overworked, overstressed, and I would dare say undercommitted to finding real justice for Cassie, as he convinced her to accept the plea deal. A felony conviction of involuntary manslaughter, carrying a sentence of 48 months in a women's correctional facility. 48 months behind bars, learning to be a felon. 48 months without those two children that she loved so much and fought so vehemently to protect. And 48 months of dreaming of the day when she would once again breathe the air of freedom with sunshine on her face and be reunited with her family. So the blessed day comes, and Cassie walks outside the prison gates, breathing the air of freedom in a borrowed dress. No job, no housing, no childcare, and I would dare say, not a real second chance, because just within a few short months, Cassie was back behind bars. Not for a new crime, not at all, but for committing a technical violation. She missed a mandatory check-in and the curfew at the woman's shelter that she was staying at because it ran out of beds that night. This is horrible for Cassie and her children. You see, this isn't just a failure on Cassie's part, not a story of a series of events that she failed at, but rather a story of systemic failure at a national and a societal level. We failed Cassie. And it's costing us more than we ever realized. Why? Because the United States incarcerates more citizens than any country on this planet. And in the decades of the 1980s and 90s, Our tough stance on crime produced tougher penalties and longer sentencing. What social scientists have termed as a prison boom, now 30, 40 years later, we're experiencing a release boom. The University of Michigan says in a study somewhere between 750,000 and 1 million parolees released on an annual basis back to society. And thanks to the research from activist and author Michelle Alexander, she illuminates the fact that communities of color are disproportionately represented in those numbers and in our criminal justice system. And that the single primary caregiver mothers on the outside lack the resource to keep them from returning to the punitive environment. And the children left in the wake of this disaster, many of them are relegated to the fact that they will never be reunited with their natural mothers. So, what happens? Separated into 2 foster homes, completely different lives. And the child-family separation trauma that these children and the multitude of other children facing the same plight, it doesn't show up in the headlines, but it will show up in the classroom, on the playground, in emergency rooms, in courtrooms, and likely back into the prison system itself. Because, as the author Brené Brown tells us, in the absence of love and belonging, suffering. Now, I've heard it said that in the human condition, experiencing pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Well, that very well may be the case for the average adult. But what about those children who had no choice but to suffer? What if we turned one woman's prison per state into a center where single mothers could rebuild their lives instead of experiencing unending punishment? Folks, we already spend billions of dollars re-incarcerating non-violent offenders in our country. In fact, the Bureau of Prisons tells us the states spend anywhere between $30,000 a year and well over $100,000 a year per prisoner per year. And yet, the rate of recidivism for these single mothers is still at 50%. That's not justice. That's recycling trauma over and over and over and over again. But what if we tried something different? Something that's actually backed by data, by economics, by simple humanity. Instead of funding a punishment cycle, what if we invest in reentry? A housing first approach with wraparound services to provide that woman and her family the environment to actually be able to succeed upon her reentry and reintegration, to offer her the career assessment, training, and workforce development, not to have an hourly job, but to have a career that will sustain her and her family. Provide the mental health services, the trauma-informed care that those children need to recover from the child-family separation trauma, and the mental health counseling that the woman needs to overcome the generational trauma and the abuse that led many women behind bars to begin with. How about access to quality and affordable childcare so you don't only keep these women in the workforce, you put these children in an environment to allow them to thrive. Because what's at stake here? Well, when we incarcerate the single primary caregiver mother on the outside, we decimate entire communities, specifically communities that are already struggling as a result of poverty and crime and racial injustice. We already pay for this in a way that will come forward into our society for years and years to come. These children rarely have an opportunity to reunite with their natural mothers. What about Cassie's children? We talked about that. Separate homes, different lives, all together. So, as we consider the cost, let's look at the actual return on investment. What if we closed just one prison and turned it into a hub for reintegration and recovery? Here's how the numbers work. Reducing the rates of recidivism among these single mothers could add thousands of real jobs back to our economy. And that increase in workflow and workforce participation adds billions of dollars back to our economy, right? And the taxpayer saves billions because we reduce prison spending, reduce reliance on the amount of money we spend on entitlement programs, and to ease the burden on an already overloaded, ineffective, and some would say broken foster care system. Data from a 2023 study done by the National Association of State Legislatures tells us that even a small reduction in rates of recidivism would yield great return to our country. Every dollar that we spend on programs like this, we could experience an economic gain to the United States of $6.75. Dollar investment to $6.75. This is not charity. It's cost effective. It's not about being soft on crime. It's about being strong and solid on recovery, right? We say that we're committed to second chances, but our systems are designed for second sentences. So, let's bring it up and have a different outcome for Cassie. You ready? That day comes. She walks out of those gates. She breathes the air of freedom for the first time. And not to return to the street, but to enter a facility that actually allows her to be reunited with her children, providing them the support and the stability and a path forward to real opportunity. And you know what? For the first time, probably in a long time, for Cassie and her family, they finally feel a sense of community and belonging. Now, our mother, Cassie, she's not just surviving, right? She is starting over again. This is not fantasy. Housing First programs already exist in our country, and they work. They reduce the rates of recidivism. They reduce the amount we spend on entitlement programs. And more importantly, they restore families. But they're far and few between, and they're grossly underfunded. Programs like the BARD Prison Initiative and Hudson Link show us that just through the prison education curriculum alone of people seeking higher education behind bars, those graduates, their rates of recidivism have been as low as 2.5%. 2.5%. So I ask you again, what if we just close one prison and turn it into a hub for healing and reintegration? But it's going to take all of us. Government, corporations, philanthropy, and the faith community to pull us forward from an environment of punishment to an economy of changing lives. When someone stumbles, do we build more cages or do we build human capacity? Do we invest in retribution and punishment, or is it redemption? Let's turn punishment into partnership. Let's transform one prison into a place where families can come together, grow together, heal together, and prosper together. Because here is the fundamental truth. When we rebuild her, we rebuild us.